Watching a movie together is a great way to spend time as a family, but picking something suitable for everyone can be tricky. Luckily, there's a library of animated children's classics to provide wholesome entertainment for all ages. That is, unless you end up picking one of these chilling works of animation, which may actually provide you with a month of sleepless nights. With intense themes and imagery, these movies might be for kids, but they're really dark. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and these are the top 10 darkest animated children's movies.
Hey, what are you gonna do, suck me to death?
Number 10, The Black Cauldron. Some of you youngsters might not be familiar with this one. Heck, some of you old-timers might not be either. These days, Disney does just about everything it can to make sure nobody finds out about The Black Cauldron. Why, you ask? Well, partly because it was one of the biggest commercial flops in the history of the studio, and partly because it's one of the darkest, most disturbing films they ever made. The Black Cauldron is based on Lloyd Alexander's series of high fantasy novels, The Chronicles of Prydain. I've never read the books myself, but basically it's all elves and goblins and whatnot.
Friend? You're no friend.
According to Alexander himself, the movie isn't a whole lot like the books anyway. Instead, it follows a sort of generic fantasy-by-the-numbers orphan-to-hero plotline.
I'm not afraid of the Horn King.
What it does take from the books, however, is an army of undead warriors raised from a cauldron by the film's protagonist, the Horned King.
Now I call on my army of the dead. The Cauldron Born.
Just look at these creeps, and that's not the half of it. Many of the film's most terrifying sequences ended up on the cutting room floor, in a bid to bring the film down to a PG-13 rating in the US.
Oh, sire. He's gone.
Number 9. Pinocchio. What? The little puppet who just wanted to be a real boy? If you're asking that, it's probably been a long time since you've seen Pinocchio.
I can talk. I can walk.
It's dark enough when you consider the implications of tricking naughty boys into going to a place called Pleasure Island.
It's Pleasure Isle for me.
But what actually happens there is somehow even worse. Pinocchio becomes embroiled in a hedonistic rampage of drink, tobacco, and vandalism, before the coachman, who is a deeply unsettling person in general, turns his friend into a donkey.
Come on. Let him go.
Just the concept of what is happening in the scene is horrific. The look on Lampwick's face as he realizes his inescapable fate is downright disturbing. It's a scene that somehow becomes more messed up the older you get.
I've been double-crossed. Help!
And we're just throwing this out there, but Geppetto is the creepiest Disney character ever. I know he's supposed to be endearing, but his obsession with creating his own little boy is, well, it's concerning.
Maybe we'd better go to bed.
I don't know, maybe puppets just haven't stood the test of time, but he just comes off as a total creep.
I wouldn't lie to you.
You could try. Who knows, you might get away with it.
Number 8. Spirited Away. Sure, in some senses, Miyazaki's Spirited Away is the cute fantasy adventure that introduced the wonders of Japanese animation to so many people in the West. In other senses, it's a dark and lonely adventure where a vulnerable girl's parents turn into literal pigs, and she's transported to this freaky world where everybody who doesn't want to eat her wants to exploit her in some way. Or almost everybody.
Mom! Dad! Come on, quit eating! Let's get out of here!
And yeah, it all turns out okay-ish in the end, but from the moment her pork chop mom and pop turn their heads around, Spirited Away pumps out a whole lot of nightmare fuel, especially for a PG rating. With that said, this movie is nothing less than brilliant, but that doesn't change how screwed up it can be. Number 6. The Secret of NIMH. This might just be the darkest animation you've never heard of. For those of you who saw The Secrets of NIMH as a child, it was probably an experience that you'll never forget. In many ways, it's hard to pick out anything specific about NIMH that really sets it apart as a dark film. But the overall morbid nature, desperation, and warped sense of scale all add up together.
See, I'm allergic to cat. I'm allergic to cat.
There's nothing really that sounds too scary about a cat and an owl, but from the perspective of these little rodents, nothing could be more terrifying. And those glowing, inhuman eyes just stick with you.
But Timothy has pneumonia. He can't even get out of bed.
Number 5. Fantasia. Is Fantasia really a kid's movie? Sure, it's got Mickey Mouse, and it's animated, but have you ever heard a kid say, "Mom, I want to watch Fantasia again"? Those mops that split into like a million tiny, terrifying mops while classical music plays in the background? That's my favorite movie. Of course not. Fantasia was a way of pushing the envelope. It was a demonstration of what could be done with animation, made by Walt Disney in order to cement the studio's legacy.
Well, we don't exactly know what happened.
But despite that, Disney still insists it's a family movie, so it gets its shot at taking a place in our list. And wow, it is a dark one. When you watch Fantasia as a child, there's really nothing to cling on to. No real plot, just one long, demented LSD trip, full of weird stuff that gets weirder and scarier, accompanied by music that you would never listen to, and also happens to be really frightening. Who thought that this would be a good way to get kids to do their chores? Number 4. Animal Farm. Look, this one's not for kids. I don't care what anyone says. If you looked at the title of Animal Farm and thought, hey, that sounds like a nice, fun, family-friendly rural adventure, you were in for a nasty surprise.
Few of us will ever know the blessings of a peaceful old age.
Animal Farm is actually based on the novella of the same name, written by British author George Orwell, who fought in the Spanish Civil War and most famously wrote 1984, which was the defining work in the dystopia genre. Like 1984, Animal Farm can be broadly received as a satirical critique of Soviet communism. Unlike 1984, all the characters are animals. Oh, and all the leaders are pigs, so that's some satire for you.
A vote for my man is a vote for the life beautiful.
Dark lowlights include when the trusty old horse finally succumbs to the injuries of hard labor and is immediately shipped off to the glue factory.
The other animals finally recognized the death wagon from Mr. Wimper's glue factory.
Oh, and the final revolution scene where the cows do not look like nice cows? Oh my god. Number 3. The Hunchback of Notre Dame. This film is, in our opinion, Disney's darkest. There's a good chance that the first time you watched The Hunchback as a kid, you didn't really know what was going on.
Blasphemy, see? Contrition, damnation.
For starters, there's a fairly unrelatable hero in Quasimodo. I mean, you feel sorry for him, sure, but it's hard to actually put yourself in his shoes, or anyone else's for that matter. Frollo is this creepy old man. Esmeralda is a gypsy, which is something some people really don't like for some reasons that we don't understand.
Look at that disgusting display. Yes, sir.
And at the end of it all, Quasi doesn't get the girl. Why? Because he's a big old freak, and she'd rather date the handsome guard who was trying to hunt her down. This was back in the era of Disney where they hit you with the red pills. Also, Frollo is a pretty terrifying villain in more ways than one. And evil or not, the guy being thrown into what essentially is a pit of hellfire at the end. That's pretty dark.
Plunge them into the fiery pit.
Number 2. The Brave Little Toaster. How dark can it be? With a cute, adorable little face like that, this is sure to be a fun, friendly romp with a bunch of happy-go-lucky, electrically powered pals, right? Wrong.
It's my function!
In many ways, this movie is like Toy Story if Toy Story was about appliances instead of toys, and they replaced the themes of childhood with the themes of existentialism and suicide. Meet our good friend, the air conditioning unit, who loses his mind, rants maniacally at the other appliances,
I like being stuck in this stupid wall!
and then self-destructs. That is, he commits suicide. Right before the rest of the cordless cast shrug it off like it's nothing.
I didn't know he'd take it so hard.
Well, he was a jerk anyway.
Good God, the vacuum cleaner is cold-blooded. What follows this little conflict in the abandoned house is a trip through the woods, which turns into a nightmare picnic. But the real kicker is when Toaster, the film's protagonist, has an actual nightmare about losing his master, which includes this clown, fireman, hellspawn abomination, equipped with a range of weaponry designed to torture a Toaster. Then there's this guy, who essentially murders appliances for parts. And let's not forget the junkyard scene. There is a 4-minute song in which broken cars sing about how useless they are as a giant magnet tosses them into a car crusher.
I just can't seem to get started. Don't have the heart to live in the fast lane, all that is past and gone.
The song is called Worthless, and it's probably the most depressingly nihilistic song that's ever been put in a kids movie.
And there ain't nothing you can do about it.
Oh, and this last car drives itself onto the conveyor belt and directly to its own death, so another creative suicide choice. Number 1, Watership Down. Of course it's Watership Down. Nothing really comes close to this epic tale of bunny migration and, getting laid? Yeah, a whole load of this film is about rabbits getting laid. There's an entire section dedicated to busting out the lady rabbits from a farm so they can, repopulate the warren.
I've come to let you out. Will you come with us?
On top of that, the scariest rabbit you could possibly imagine makes several references to doing the dirty with all the female rabbits in his colony, even using them as an incentive for his guards.
And if you want a doe, you have your choice here. You're not an officer for nothing.
And yeah, this is really the scariest rabbit that you could imagine. Just a big pile of cascading muscle and scar tissue with a violent streak that makes Ted Bundy look like a primary school teacher. And more importantly, the violent imagery is just yikes. Death, blood, being buried alive, dark AF.
Runs blocked with dead bodies.
Really, the whole tone of this movie is disturbing. But what do you think? What's the darkest children's movie you've ever seen? Did it make our list? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. But most importantly, that air conditioner was a jerk anyway.